Honestly, okay, this is why I wanted to speak a lot earlier because Chris was saying something in response to me, and I did forget some of like that he was saying. But let me see if I can bring some stuff back up. He talked about, from what I remember, he talked about he's fully prepared to be man. As far as full preparation, fulfilling all the requirements and having all the criteria set for being a man. That is problematic, especially if you're going to argue that he's fully God and he's fully God as well, because part of having a full requirement for being man that takes away from you being fully God, because part of the requirement for being fully man is, for one, I'm able to die, and two, I'm not God. There's really no either or, and the moment you start questioning, or you not questioning, the moment you start trying to reconcile the two, as far as saying, well, God can come down as man, God can be a man, that's the moment you go down to the ideas of all the mythological religions like Greek mythology, Norse mythology, Roman mythology. They too share this concept of a demigod, God becoming man, God the Son, and stuff like that. They share that concept. However, and we will both see that as when you actually do use your intellect, you will start realizing, wait, that's not necessarily um, coherent. As a matter of fact, just a couple of days ago on TikTok, I was having a conversation with a Trinitarian, and I asked them about why can't polytheism be true. Part of the reason why he told me polytheism can be true is because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. This idea of, funny enough, he said this idea of God, God taking the form of man or sheep and monkeys and stuff like that. It doesn't make sense to him. And then I'm saying, what's so? What's the he saw his intellect when he's talking about polytheistic religions, not realizing that it's the same thing that's for his own Trinitarian view and Trinitarian view. So the first thing when Chris said about God is fully prepared to be man, if you're going to make that point, being fully prepared to be man means you're not God, because the attributes that God has contradicts the attributes that human has. You can't be both. I cannot be both all knowing and limited in knowledge at the same exact time. That makes no sense. Even I would say I don't want to be disrespectful and say excuse, but even the comments of when you say, well, it's a mystery, God works in mysterious ways, don't use our limited thinking. Yeah, but that's a subjective response, because any religion can say the same thing. A polytheist can come to you and say, hey, God can be multiple gods. Just don't think about it. It doesn't make sense because because of your human mind. However, if you God works in mysterious ways, God can be five different gods at the same time. So just don't think about it, because your human limited thinking. God can do anything. So that's a subjective response, because any religion can actually say the same thing and it can actually argue the same point. What takes it away is the human. When you start taking away the human intellect, that's when you run into a whole lot of problems. And you said, if I'm not mistaken, you said that I don't necessarily understand the Trinity and the concept of fully God or fully man. I would say there's a difference between me not understanding something and you thinking that I'm misrepresenting. So I would, so it's not as if I don't understand. It's not as if I don't understand. I actually do believe I understand the Trinitarian view real well. I just don't agree with it. Nor does it, or when you even think about it intellectually or rationally, it does not make sense, especially when you hear and especially when you understand it. Just like I'm pretty sure when guys like Christian Man or Brother Nazam or even Brother Mustafa, when they start thinking, I'm pretty sure they understand the Trinity as well. However, to them, it does not make sense. So it's the same way, especially when you talk about verses, going back and saying focusing on certain verses than others. It's as if, well, this verse matters more to me than this verse. Realizing, well, wait a minute. Well, we have a doctrine and it has to make sense. And last but not least, you talked about how you're forced to have this doctrine by reading the scripture. I would disagree with that vehemently, especially when you do understand Christian history, as far as the ecumenical councils, even something as a huge topic as the canonization of scripture, which church fathers believed which scripture was scripture a long time ago. Even something I'm pretty sure you would know, as far as how the gospels even got their name. Learning about Christian history and actually looking at it from an unbiased point of view, instead of reading it retrospectively, that's when I would vehemently disagree that the scripture determined the doctrine. As a matter of fact, they were determining what the scripture was because they already formulated the doctrine, which at that time there was not canonized. So yeah, I would disagree when you say, as far as that's why even you have coming from a Muslim point of view, I'm listening to a Unitarian Christian and Christian man, and I'm also listening to Trinitarians like you, Chris, and like also Diego and Tim. Yeah, your name is Tim. These are fundamentals, the fundamentals of a particular faith. In Islam, you don't necessarily get that issue fundamentally. So this is why it's very, very problematic as far as which doctrine came first, or what was the original doctrine, which one is actually formulating the doctrine and reading into it, and which one is actually coming up with an accurate account of what the gospels actually say. Even though as a Muslim I don't agree with it regardless, it's a matter of, well, which is which, as a matter of fact. And based on what I've looked at it, and it's not just me saying, the gospels can actually talk formulate that Jesus is a triune God, or God is a triune God. It does not mean I'll believe it. So it's not as if, well, I'm trying to go out of my way to make sure that the Trinity is not in the Bible or nothing like that. No, it's more or less when I do read it, when I do read this idea of a Trinity is not something that's explicit, which means that's a problem already, because that's something that can lead to confusion. That's one. It's not something that's explicitly stated. What is explicitly stated is the fact that Jesus is a man. He's this. Even according to the crucifixion view, he was crying, has all the attributes of a man. Even saying, to going as far as to say that he was risen, or as far as to say I keep I forgot this. I forgot it. Lost my train of thought, but I do apologize. So based on the way I read it, and I'm pretty sure it's not just me, but based on the way I read it, it's safe to say that this idea of a Trinitarian, fully God, fully man, they're not things that's explicitly stated. And if it's not explicitly stated, you can't say you're forced to believe in it, because you're not forced. You can't be forced to believe in something that's ambiguous. No, you're only forced to take in something that's explicit. And based on the explicit things such as I myself can do nothing, based on explicit statements such as Jesus himself saying that the Father is the only true God, and the glory that I had with you before the world began, I give it to the disciples. So these are explicit statements that I'm not necessarily hearing being talked about, and I'm actually hearing being pushed aside, as in terms of trying to focus on the more ambiguous statements that could be reinterpreted, redefined, and stuff. So you can't say you're forced to do it if you're trying to